So this is the original hacking. I thought this is the first thing I always thought of when I thought of hacking was taking over web servers. And in the old days, this used to be so easy it would make you sick, which is why Linux people got this attitude, because if you had a Windows web server, you could just go in the URL bar and you could go to your website and you could just do directory traversal. So you could take this thing and do // Windows System 32 command.exe and press enter, and you get a command prompt right there in the browser and just type it. I saw that in movies, so I said, oh, they're faking. No, you could really do that. Because the web server just served the files in the machine. It didn't have a permission structure that limited where it could go, and you could just run anything on the machine. And this kind of thing still happens, but not exactly that way. But anyway, this is why the Linux people got an attitude and said Microsoft is idiots, their software is junk, you'd have to be a fool. That was true back when Microsoft didn't care, but Microsoft got abused enough that they became humiliated enough to mend their ways, and now it's no longer true that a Windows server is intrinsically any more dangerous than a Linux server. It's just a question of how well they're set up. But anyway, so we're going to talk about how web apps work. Web apps are an enormous issue in security. That's where people steal most data. We'll talk about the OWASP top 10. There's a group called the Open Web Application Security Project, which every company you know belongs to. My students and I staffed the OWASP booth at RSA a few years back, and we were supposed to recruit members, and we did not recruit any members because everybody came by to say, I'm already a member and I love this group. There's nobody that doesn't know about it that we could find, and there's nobody that isn't already a member we could find. Every company's in it, and I brought some little netbooks and showed them WebGoat and stuff. Then the guy that wrote WebGoat came by, and he didn't like the fact that we didn't have suits on, but that's RSA for you. Anyway, but they approved a hands-on workshop I'll be teaching at RSA this time, so we'll see if they throw me out for not wearing a suit again or not. So anyway, I don't think they'll throw me out. Anyway, so basically, the thing about web apps are intrinsically dangerous and extremely powerful, so everybody uses them. You've got all these customers out there using browsers like Internet Explorer and Firefox and Safari and everything, and they're sending requests over HTTP or HTTPS up to a web server, which is running web server software, typically IIS or Apache, or it might be Nginx these days, and that just requests data from the server, and the server sends it down. Files you get. It's a modified version of a file server that just serves up files from a folder, that's all the server has to do, is take all these requests and reply to them. Now, the most popular web server in the world has been Apache. Microsoft has been number 2, and then sometimes it's measured as number 1, because what happens is if you're a small business, you use free stuff like Linux and Apache, but if you're a big company with a lot of locations and a lot of computers, then you use Microsoft stuff to get Active Directory domains with all these forests and cross-forest trusts and all this stuff you need to manage a monstrous company like a big corporation. And if you're using the Microsoft Active Directory, it works best if you use the Microsoft everything, including the Microsoft web server. So the big companies use Microsoft products, the small companies use Linux products, with, of course, exceptions. Like, for example, Cloudflare, that really needs high performance, they have to use Linux, because Linux gets the most value out of your hardware. But they're not doing normal company things with their servers. Their servers are all reverse proxies in a giant global cluster. And the same thing with Google, that has this enormous geo-cluster spread across the world. They're running Linux and not Windows on that because they're doing a specialized task that Windows is not optimized for. But if you want to run normal management tasks like hiring and firing and paying employees and keeping track of what everybody's doing on your whole enterprise, then Windows has got a better solution for all that than Linux. So that's why the big companies go to it. And then you see Nginx is the green one there coming up. Nginx is a stripped-down version of Apache. It's spelled strangely. What I've been told, although I have you verified, is Nginx was written by criminals to control botnets. If you look at the anonymous attack of Sony in 2011 or 2012, which I think eventually 300 people went to prison for, I don't know if they all went to prison, but they were prosecuted. They had about 10,000 people supposedly participating in this attack, and they were coordinated in an IRC channel. And when you look at the logs, the chat logs of that IRC channel, all anybody is saying is, I lost my connection again. My bot stopped. What's wrong with this thing? Who wrote this crappy software? Because you can't control 10,000 bots with IRC. It's not going to be good for it. And this is a problem criminals have. Criminals have botnets of 1 million or 10 million machines, and there's no commercial software you can buy that can manage a network that big because nobody can afford to own one. The largest network in the world is the one that hosts my website, 1&1, and it's 60,000 machines in Germany. Probably Google is bigger, but the number is not public. But the criminals routinely have 100,000 to millions, so they invented special software to manage gigantic botnets. And Nginx was the first one. They took Apache and they threw away about 90% of it to make it faster, and that's Nginx. And for a long time, all the documentation was only in Russian, because it was invented by Russian botnet masters and they didn't care about anything else. And it gradually came into the light. Like almost everything in this course, it started with criminals, and then the good guys sort of dragged it out and started using it for other purposes. Anyway. So web applications are enormously important, so you can have shopping carts and blogs and Facebook and all that jazz. But the problem is, as you know, everybody makes mistakes in their code. And if you make a mistake in a web app, there's the whole world connecting to it over the internet. So a lot of people get to find the mistake and exploit it and use it to hurt people. So it's a much bigger problem. Just like if you make a mistake in a really popular program like WordPress or Microsoft Office, a lot of people get hurt from that. So a static web page you just create using HTML. That's a page that just sits there and is the same for every viewer and doesn't change until you change it. And that's relatively secure because there's not too much to go wrong with it. The only thing that can really go wrong is sort of a directory traversal on the web server, like I was saying. But that's also no fun. Everybody wants to be able to log in and see a customized stuff and shop and put up blog posts and all that jazz. So you need dynamic web pages. Now, form tags let you collect data from the user. And then these scripting languages let you write active scripts on the server which process that data, and that's where you get into trouble. Because in practice, an enormous number of those scripts are vulnerable. It seems like every website uses PHP, at least 80% of them have a file upload vulnerability. One of mine got hacked, my sister's just got hacked. Everybody using WordPress or any other PHP-based platform just gets used to getting hacked all the time. Files you didn't put there just keep appearing on your server because it's very hard to write secure PHP, and pretty much nobody knows how. So the form is simple enough. That's an HTML feature. You can make a form element, and this will let you put in a username and a password. This simple one doesn't even have a submit button, so it doesn't do anything, but you can add a submit button. And then you can send the username and password with an HTTP request up to the server. And then, so that's going to go up to the server, but you're going to have a script on the server, which is going to harvest that data, username and password and whatever else you're sending up, and then do something with it, like put it in a database or compare it to records to see if you have the right password, and it's going to let you log in and things like that. So that's called CGI, the Common Gateway Interface. And you can take many different languages and write languages on the server. To do this, you can just do it in C or C++ or Perl. Perl is fairly common. PHP is even more common. So Perl, you can just write a Perl script. Here's a Perl script that just prints a couple of lines of text. And if you put it on the server, now I did my stuff in Perl at first. So let me show you some examples, and I got hacked. Okay, and come on, 10A, I say. There we are. All right, so here's my feedback form, an old version. I have feedback form. You can say things about my class. I don't know if I still do, because teacher review, rate my professor came back up. And that's probably a better place to put things like that. But for a long time, they were down because they kept getting sued and shutting down, so I had my own for a while. So I had a form where you could say something about the class, and it would go up there. So what happened when I put this up, immediately a bunch of people started putting up Italian Viagra spam in it. So I put in a caption. I put in the sleaziest caption in the world. It's always a horse. Doesn't vary at all, but you have to write in horse. That was enough to stop the spammers, because it was just an automated script. That made it secure enough for my purposes. And it also generates the, like I was saying, threat modeling is what matters. You don't need to have a vault door if the people attacking you are little kids. So a weak defense might be enough for your purposes. But one thing about this is the way this works. If you look at the source code of this page, it's got a form here, and the form has an action. And the action is feedback5.pl. And this is a huge issue on web applications. You can't see that Perl code. So web designers get used to this, that you can't see the code, so they put things in the code like hard-coded passwords and comments with important things, assuming nobody will ever see the code. But the problem is it is very easy for the web server to get confused and accidentally reveal the source code to your page instead of running it. It can be sometimes as simple. There are certain exploits where you would just take this and put it in the URL, and there was, I think it was a Microsoft ASP vulnerability, had this one. You just go up here and put that in there, and then you put :data after it with the dollars in front of it. And now it will show you the source code. And there's a series of exploits like this. So designers think that nobody's going to see their source code, but probably the most common way this happens now is you're writing this stuff, and other people are writing your stuff, and somebody in your company says, I know, we'll put all our code up on GitHub. So they just put all their code on GitHub, and now everybody sees the source code. If you search through GitHub, there are thousands of them with passwords Amazon API keys, everything in there, private SSH certificates, because people just dump your code up there, and nobody thought that the designer would put secrets in the code, but the designer thought nobody would expose the code, and this is how you end up with security disasters, is two people undoing each other's work where both of them are doing something that makes sense in their context. So anyway, there's form collects various data like which class you're taking and stuff, and then you hit a submit button, and it runs that script. Now you can't normally see that script, but I put up the code of that script so you can see it, and you can see how not to do it. So here's my Perl script. Here's where it gets the data. There's a parameter called class comments and animal, and this is what gets the data that the person's put in the class comments and animal field. If the animal is not equal to horse, then it says error and won't print your comments because you appear to be spam. And if it does appear to be, if you did put in horse, then it takes a hidden parameter called results file, and it prints the results in the results file. Now, there's a lot of things wrong here, and this, I didn't know how wrong I was this time, so other students hacked me. The first thing is, there's a parameter that controls the results file, so you can change it and just write over other files, like deface the web page, things like that. That's a good, clean, fun thing. That happens a lot. What's even nastier is I didn't filter anything, so you can put script tags and other tags in the TIFF you put up. This is cross-site scripting vulnerability, which 80% of websites have. You can put not just text, but scripts in the comment, and they will run and attack other people. And we'll play with that a little later. So I had several versions of this thing, improving it to fix the various problems. But just like everybody else, I found out what they all found out is it's mighty hard to be very secure with web apps. If you just write, I've made plenty of vulnerabilities in them. When you're trying to get something done by tomorrow and you're rushing, then the easiest way to do it is the wrong way to do it. And I've done it just as much as everybody else. So anyway, Microsoft has their contribution here. They have ASP, like their imitation of PHP, essentially, to run on the Microsoft servers, and it's fine. I remember I wrote an app a few years ago that would let a bunch of students access practice tests on the web. It was pretty cool. It's not that hard to write. But anyway, you're typically running IIS if you're using ASP, because it's a Microsoft product. You don't usually run it on Apache. So ASP looks like that. You have these percent tags. Now this, by the way, is another horrible thing about the web, which I couldn't believe. So I came from the old days with C and Fortran and stuff like that. And this HTML is an incredibly evil language because there is no correct syntax for HTML. The problem is the web came out and people wrote all this stuff in HTML2. And it's up there forever until the end of time. There will be pages from like 1991 in HTML2. So every browser has to support really old stuff. Now what's even worse is a bunch of people are surfing the web with IE4 and stupid things like that. So your browser might be 20 years out of date. So you might be viewing HTML5 with a browser that doesn't know anything beyond HTML2. And if you were like strict language like Fortran or C, you would just put up error messages, I'm sorry, you can't see this page, get a better browser. But nobody wants that. What they want it to be like now, they want it to be like TV. See, there's black and white TV, then they've upgraded to color TV, and they did this horrible thing that thank God is now extinct called NTSC, which experts in the field called never twice the same color, which was an attempt to add color to a black and white TV signal in such a way that a black and white TV could still see the picture. And that turned out to be almost impossible. So color TVs had really miserable color. They kept flaking out and going to the wrong color because it wasn't as good as digital TV, which we have now. But this is what the point. So browsers will read a page. And if your browser is reading through this page and it hits something like less than %, it says, oh, I don't know what that means. That must be some advanced HTML tag after my version, so I'll just ignore it. And this is what TVs did. So you hit a color TV signal, it says, well, I can't reveal colors, so I'll just show you the black and white version. And if something's broken, your TV just flickers and goes on, because you don't want it to just not show you anything. It will show you a degraded experience version of the page. So your browser cannot tell if this stuff is written right or wrong. And your browser tries to guess when you make mistakes and fill them in. And each browser makes different guesses. This is why companies like Yahoo was the most notorious one. Yahoo never bothered to write good code at all. All their code was full of errors because they just did whatever happened to work in a popular browser and called it good enough and went on. And your browser doesn't quit and give you an error message if you make a mistake like C would. You'll just say syntax error, recompile your code. You can just not use the right tags, spell things wrong, not close things, and it will just guess and mostly look all right. So anyway, this way, when you write a page, you're now using two languages at once. This junk is ASP, this junk is HTML, and you can have 4 or 5 or 10 languages on the same page. And your poor browser tries to make sense out of it, and your server tries to make sense out of it. And as you'll see, the biggest security blunders in the world come from code injection, and that comes from when you switch from one language to another. Just like I was talking, when two people have different ideas and they talk to each other, it's very much like when two languages connect. And all web pages are a monstrous Frankenstein monster of many languages just tied together loosely. So that's another issue why they have so many security problems. So Apache, the most popular web server, everybody loves it, everybody learns it. It's very confusing because they keep changing everything across many versions. But anyway, it's a good thing to know. We used to have an Apache course here, and it would be nice if some teacher got motivated to bring it back. That guy retired, he went off to go meditate in Tibet, which is fine, but we need someone to teach Apache here. Anyway, so you can write your dynamic web pages using scripting languages. JavaScript and PHP are the most common, but VBScript is another option. PHP was originally personal homepage, and then they decided it wasn't cool to have an acronym that stands for something that's not Linux enough, so they made it stand for PHP Hypertext Processor, so the P doesn't stand for anything because that's an in-joke for recursion, and it's like the news, not Unix. Anyway, PHP, it makes it very easy to quickly do anything you want, and I use it all the time, but it leads to god-awful security flaws. So here's a PHP example. You have an HTML page, and then in the middle, you decide, oh, I'm done writing HTML, I want to write PHP. So you just put this tag in, which your browser will decide, I don't know what you're talking about, I'll just ignore this stuff. But the server that speaks PHP will say, that's PHP, and execute it, if the PHP is configured correctly on the server. And then it will run that code. So you can put active code in a real programming language inside HTML, and that's how it's done. PHP itself has a variety of vulnerabilities, but in practice, most of the vulnerabilities in PHP come from coders making mistakes, like I did in that Perl code, where they just don't think it through. There's a parameter that's important, like what file I'm writing to, which really shouldn't be in the control of the user, but they don't think of that. And it turns, that's how people can hack into websites all the time. Cold Fusion is a proprietary language from Macromedia, bought by Adobe. Some people think it's great, but it costs a lot of money, so I've never used it. But they have these CF tags, CF location, URL, and so on. So again, your browser just gives up and says that doesn't look like HTML, I'll just ignore it. But the Cold Fusion server recognizes it and runs that code. And it has, like everything else, its list of vulnerabilities. Every single language has an endless chain of vulnerabilities found and reported and exploits. So whatever you're using, you have to keep updating to get the latest version. VBScript is Microsoft scripting language. You can run it on the client and you can run it on the server. And VBScript looks like that. You put it in script tags, and in the script type parameter, you tell it it's VBScript. If you don't define the script type, it will assume it's JavaScript. All right. And that would only work in Internet Explorer and not Firefox. And by the way, I'm not so sure it works in Edge. Anybody know, does VBScript still work in Edge? I think it does. I don't know, Microsoft is phasing out some of their older technology, and I'm not really sure about Edge. Anyway, so it has, of course, its list of vulnerabilities running on just like everything else. Every year people find another dozen flaws in everything. JavaScript is extremely powerful, very simple. The first one, most people learn how to add simple programming to your page. So here's one from some site I found where it defines a function in JavaScript, and it'll pop up a box saying you like breaking rules. This says don't click the button, and if you click the button, see, this is more cruelty. This is HTML. Input type equals button. HTML does not have any on-click attribute. So the browser will ignore this on-click, but JavaScript does. So this is an even less obvious way to insert JavaScript inside an HTML statement. So you get used to this stuff, but it actually doesn't really make any sense at all. It's sort of like when you go to countries where people don't speak English and they sort of mix some other language with half the words and English with half the words. And they get used to that until people think that's normal, but the fact is, it's a pretty rotten way to communicate. You'll have a lot of misunderstandings. Yeah?
On-click is not an HTML attribute?
No, it's JavaScript. Although you can look it up and see what people say. Anyway, that was good. Inside here is JavaScript. This is certainly not HTML. And it's not in script tags either. So there's a bunch of dirty tricks.
Wait, but how come?
This is JavaScript, chastise user, and it goes up here to find the function and executes it.
Yeah, but like input is a tag.
Input is HTML.
Yeah. So
and on-click is what moves from HTML to JavaScript. So I think you could argue it's in both languages. But it's a pretty, the more you think about this, if you actually study like operating systems and programming languages, the more you think about this, the more worried you should be. I mean, this is really sick to not even pick what language you're in. This is why your browser can't tell whether you did it right or wrong, because it has no clue what you're trying to do. Yeah?
Just to clarify, so type, value,
yeah.
and name are attributes of input, but on-click
yeah.
is not an attribute of input?
On-click I'd have to look up and see what they call it. It is somehow a very strange thing that looks like an attribute, but it's actually in another language. So it's a good question. I think somebody will have to come up with the technical term for what that thing is that bridges across two languages. There was a time in 2010 and 2012, there was the I love you worm that went on, and everyone screamed at Microsoft, Microsoft, you rotten bums, you took a Word document that should have just been text and you put programming code in it, what rotten bums you are. Now in Linux, we have text documents and we have executable files, and they're in different files because we'd never be stupid enough to do that, and yet we got this. They said, wait, this is exactly what everybody screamed at Microsoft about. You put active code and mix it into a static document and ship it all in one box, and then the poor browser isn't sure what to do with it. Anyway, it leads to an endless series of problems. So there's JavaScript only release, just like everything else. And so let's take a look at a few of these fun things on these demonstrations here. I think I'll do it after we do some iClickers. Yeah, it's the right time. We'll do some iClickers, and then we'll be at the right time to take a break. So grab one if you need one. And then we'll do a few of these things live. Web attacks are the most fun because you don't need anything more than a browser, you don't need any fancy tools, and you can do god-awful things. All right, starting a session. All right, looks like it's going to work. So, what's the most popular web server? I don't think I'll be able to grade this one this semester. Well, I'll quit at 20 because I can't really grade this one. There's currently a tie. As far as I know, IIS and Apache are currently pretty much in a tie, and the difference is not large enough that it's worth knowing. It used to be that Apache outnumbered IIS by a lot, but Microsoft pulled ahead. Microsoft's server offerings are really quite good. I think
right now it's in Nginx.
What's that?
Well, Nginx is rising and taking away Apache. So
Yeah.
That's why Apache and IIS.
Yeah, but Nginx is still down around maybe 10%. But up around top, it's like IIS and Apache back and forth. Yeah, because Microsoft servers keep getting better and better. To where people used to sneer at them, but around Server 2008 and especially Server 2012, Microsoft servers really started working. To where people take them seriously, and the Linux people can't get away with just bragging and claiming they're better. And Linux servers took a gigantic beating over Heartbleed. I mean, Heartbleed totally burst the myth that Linux was safe. It was far more dangerous than the Microsoft offering at that time, and that really changed the attitude in the world, I think.
Yeah, I wonder why you say Heartbleed changed the office. Heartbleed is from OpenSSL.
It is, but it didn't affect you if you had a Microsoft server.
But it's nothing to do with Linux.
In practice, you'd have it if you had a Linux server, and you wouldn't have it if you had a Microsoft server. So from like a business executive point of view, they would be happier with Microsoft server. I mean, the point is, for a long time, the Linux people said, switch to Linux and you'll be safe. If you use Microsoft, you're going to get hacked. And Microsoft fixed that, and that is really no longer true. And it really got people's attention when all the Linux servers got hacked and the Microsoft servers were fine. I mean, that's why I remember about 4 years ago, I started having to say in class, the Microsoft product is more secure. And I felt really bad about saying that. And we all got used to saying that gradually. As Microsoft fixed all the ridiculous flaws in Office, and then Linux started stumbling. So I mean, the point is, right now there's no real difference in terms of security. And 5 years ago, there was a huge perception that Linux was much safer. And nobody believes that anymore, I think. Anyway,
I think
yeah.
there's more competent Microsoft trained support
Yes.
staff too. So
Yeah, Microsoft is writing it better, and they're teaching people how to use it better. And the fact is, and Linux has not improved in the same way. And they're trying to. They're trying to audit the OpenSSH and other products with great difficulty. This is the fundamental problem. If you have a big, boring job in Linux, there's no way to motivate anybody to do it. Whereas Microsoft pays people to do drudgery all day long. They've got them in cubicles. They've got an endless team of poor Dilbert-like abused people to do anything, no matter how dull it is. That's the giant engine of capitalism. But there's a fundamental weakness there. Anyway, let's move on. And it's certainly good to have the discussion. A lot of people get very excited about this one. Anyway, what language uses that sort of thing with the percent signs? Anyway, one thing that I think is not controversial is if you're going to be a security expert, you need to know both. You'll be anybody in IT, you need to know how to run Linux and how to run Windows. They're both important.
How many languages do I need to know for this type of job?
Some people know none. You should know at least one, and the more the better, depending on what you want to do. If you want to be a developer, especially web developer, you got to know a lot. But if you want to be even just a security expert, you should know at least 1 or 2 languages. And what most people learn, if you only do one, is Python. Python is simple and easy. You can really do a lot with it. But if you know any other language, they're all pretty good. You can do the same. You can do the same thing with any language, but it's easiest to do most things in Python. Anyway, this is ASP. Not the most popular answer. That's ASP, folks. TISC, active server pages. All right. Anyway, all right. What's the client-side language that runs in IE but not in Chrome? It may be hard to remember, but there was a time when IE was like 99% of the viewers, and you didn't have to worry about anything else. That was maybe 9 years ago.
Well, convincing people to let you develop for Netscape.
Yeah, yeah. It was like
But it's
none of your customers are using it. You could just ignore it and write IE only web pages, and everything was fine. Anyway. All right, and that is VBScript, the Microsoft product. Oh, good. Okay. And I got a couple more of these. All right. What's the proprietary server-side scripting developed by Microsoft? I'll quit at 30. All right, and that is ASP. See it all over Microsoft websites. All right, so what kind of language makes a form like that? All right, looks like I quit at 25 on this one. I'll take that time to nuke this number, which isn't right anyway. All right. All right, and that's HTML to make the form itself. Now, once you click submit, it has to be handled by something at the other end, which might be any variety of languages, but this thing you're looking at right there is HTML. All right, well, let's take a break till 7:05, and then we'll carry on here, demonstrate some of this stuff. I'll stop the recording. This is 123. Okay.